short list. And here are just a few of Karen Shea's accomplishments. She is a certified financial planner with over 40 years experience in the business. Must have started when you were 10. She was recipient of the Woman Achievement Award for Initiative in 1997, and then the 50 Women Who Make a Difference Award in 1998. I'm sure she can tell some incredible stories. Let's give a round of applause for Karen Shea, our guest speaker today.
All right, you get the mic. You're going to have to pay to get in that zoo like me, huh?
Well, I'm not sure I need a mic.
Okay, if you don't want it, I'll turn it on. Just hit
I can't
it.
hold all those things at the same time.
Okay. Trevor?
Good morning. I am Karen Shea, and I'm a fee-only financial planner. And my remarks this morning are not of a happy sort, but I feel called to talk about it because the universe has brought into my life for the last several months 2 families that were in need of help. And so the topic is financial exploitation or financial elder abuse. And if you'll bear with me a minute, I'm just going to give you some statistics just to provide a framework, and then we'll talk about the families. Financial exploitation or financial elder abuse is the illegal taking, misuse, or the concealment of funds, property, or assets of a vulnerable elder, according to the National Center on Elder Abuse, and poses a serious public health problem. Financial exploitation represents the highest percentage, 5.2%, of self-reported abuse among cognitively intact, community-dwelling older adults. The estimated financial loss among older Americans in 2012 was $2.9 billion. Other outcomes are financial ruin, loss of independence and security, decline in quality of life, decreased resources for health care, depression, and even suicide. Many times emergency room visits and hospitalizations are increased, and the increased risk of 5-year all-causes mortality. Unfortunately, the perpetrators are most likely to be a relative who is chronically unemployed and financially dependent on the older adult, and could be an abuser of alcohol or drugs, or it could be an in-home caretaker. Let's talk about the 2 families that I mentioned. I go to a senior workout class, not the kind you do, but you know, the slower one for us older people. And one of these members found out that I was a financial planner, and she got with me and she asked me, could I help her get out of debt? And I said I'd be happy to. And so we set up a time to meet. And I said, just bring me any statements that have to do with money, debt, whatever, and we'll sit down and we'll go through it. Well, she came at the appointed time and brought this box of things. And I should mention that several years prior to this, she had suffered from a stroke. And during that period of time while she was recovering, one of the children, one of her daughters was taking care of things for her and paying the bills, but unfortunately not paying them on time. So that was a mess that needed to be cleaned up. But this woman, God bless her, who had struggled to get her health back, really wanted to become financially independent and to be able to take over her own situation. So I told her that I would help her. And by the way, I did not charge her a penny. I spent hours with her to help her. What I found out is that she really didn't have very many savings. What she had was predictable income. And because she was a retired government worker, she had a pension, she had Social Security, so she had a predictable income monthly. And she had 5 grown children, and unfortunately, a lot of them were participating in various ways. I sat down and found out that she had 2 car loans. She had a son that had been disabled. He was a diabetic, and he had an amputation and was struggling to make an income. So she had financed a car for him and had financed a car for herself. She was a widow, and she was living in a pretty big size house, and the mortgage was in her name only. I went through some other records and found out that she had 2 loans that were titled 6 months same as cash. Do any of you know how those work? 6 months same as cash?
We heard from Joe.
If the way they're set up, and of course they don't explain this well to the consumer, is if you don't make that last payment by the expiration date, they go back to day 1 and they calculate the interest on that borrowing at the rate of 30% and tack it on to the loan. Well, she had 2 of these, and the way that happened is she needed some appliances for her house and financed those, and then she needed some tires for her car. And then, the son said, well, while you're getting tires for your car, will you get some for mine, because I need tires for my car. So this is the way this was going. I also found out that she had $20,000 worth of loans with a payday lender at a rate of 37% interest,
Oh my
which,
God.
by the way, is the maximum that the state allows. And she had no idea about that. How she got some of that debt is she borrowed money with the payday lenders to pay off her credit card debt. Her credit card debt was at 15%, the payday lenders at 37%. So it was a mess. And so one of the things I did was sit down and talk to her about, I helped her set up a schedule where we could get those 6 months cash loans paid off in time so we could avoid those interests. I went with her to the bank to see if we could restructure some of this debt. And unfortunately, because the house was in her name, both car loans were in her name, and this other debt, she had a 65% debt to income ratio. And the bank said, there's nothing that I can do. And his only solution was, he said, if you could find any of these children that have good enough credit to put that smaller car loan in their name, even if she continues to make the payments, then I can get that off out of her name and bring over that payday lender stuff. Well, we weren't able to make that happen. So, I met with her a number of times. On the second or third visit, it turned out that one of the daughters came to her and said, Mother, can you help us out? Well, Mother, can you help us out means get your checkbook out. This child had a child who had a number of speeding tickets that were not paid and had to go to court. And so they were going to have to pay for the speeding tickets, the fines, court costs. And of course, you know who ended up paying for it. And when I talked to her about, having to start to say no about this, she said, I'm praying about it. She just had a really, really hard time telling her children no. So this was a never-ending cycle. I would like to tell you that it ended happily, but I did the best I could, and I had to let go with what I couldn't deal with. I was able to communicate with one and meet with one of the children who seemed to have more responsibility, and sat down and explained the situation to her and asked her to do her best to work on this, but I had to just let it go. Let me see, just excuse me a minute. Another woman, I gave a quick introductions to at a breakfast one time, and I mentioned the fact that I was helping a family with this financial elder abuse issue. And at the end of the meeting, this woman came up to me and she was just frantic, and she said, do you work out of state? And I said, well, yes, but it turned his family happened to be in another state. And it turned out that they were worried about her grandmother. Her grandmother had an in-home caretaker, and the in-home caretaker had made friends, of course, with the grandmother, and for entertainment they were going to the casinos together. Now, as it turned out, about $140,000 worth of grandmother's money was gone. And so they were in the process of trying to figure out what to do. And then upon further investigation, it turned out that the caretaker had also persuaded the grandmother to deed the house over to her at her death. And anyway, I was just appalled with this. And I guess before meeting these families, I just had no idea, about this issue. So my advice, I mean, I'm not an expert about elder law, but my advice to her was to get her mother to pick up the phone and call an attorney, fire the caretaker, and then see what could be done. The elder laws are different in every state. So if you hire an attorney, it's best to hire an attorney that knows something about elder law. And I've done a lot of research, lots of stories out there that I won't bore you with, but the bottom line was, what can I do? How can I get the message out? And so the main thing is, if you see something, tell somebody. There is, every state has an adult protective services group, and if you go online, you can get the contact information. You don't have to give your name. You can make it anonymously if you want to. But there are ways to help people. It's just very difficult. This is a widespread problem among all different social classes. It knows no boundary for different types. It happens in lots of families, and it's highly unreported. Why do you think it's unreported? They're shamed, and they don't want to, there's this loyalty to the family member, and they don't want to get the family member in trouble and all of that. So one way, I was an investment broker at a major warehouse firm. We were constantly trained and schooled that we should watch out for suspicious behavior. Signatures that didn't look right, or clients coming in with family members that seemed to be trying to influence them in some way. Unusual withdrawals, signs of cognitive impairment, anything that would be a red flag that something undue was happening. There is a Tennessee law that really requires people to report this kind of thing if you see it. And it's just a really, really difficult issue. It's something that is not going to go away, and really it's incumbent upon all of us to pay attention to our neighbors, to our family members, and to be very diligent about this kind of thing. If you see something going on, then it's time to speak up. So, question?
Well, a question, but more a comment. And I had a customer that was elderly, and his caregiver would say, "Mr. Bennett, we need more groceries. Will you sign this check?" And she would have him sign several checks a day. And the family called and they said, "Is there any coverage under his homeowner policy for this?" And I said, "No, not really." But I said, "What about the agency this person works for?" And they said, "Oh no, she's a private individual. We just got a really good deal." So I would say always go to somebody like Home Helpers where they're licensed, bonded.
Licensed and bonded and screened and background checks. Yes.
Do you have a place where we can go to report these things anonymously? Do you know?
Adult Protective Services. Every state has an agency called Adult Protective Services. And if you go online and Google elder abuse, it'll pop up and it'll give you all the contact information that you need. That's where I would start. And, yes, ma'am.
More of a comment than a question, if that's okay, because I'm in this business. But the law that you're referring to, if anybody accepts money or takes the role of caregiver, whether it be a family member or professionally, even if you're not getting paid, by law, if you see abuse, you're required to report it.
Right.
And I have reported abuse to Adult Protective Services anonymously when I see it with a family member. I have to. I'm required. If I don't do that, then I'm as responsible as the person who's stealing from them because of the industry that I'm in. So if a family member sees something happening, they're required to report it.
By law, that's true.
Exactly. And to your point of paying, I mean, a lot of the individuals say to me, I don't want to pay an agency, I want to pay them direct, it's cheaper. And it's hard to explain to them what risk that they're putting themselves in doing it, not only from theft, potential theft, but also they're not paying any taxes or anything. It's all under the table typically. So there could be an issue if somebody gets injured. And lastly, if someone falls and gets hurt at your home, you're responsible and your insurance is going to cover it. And if you don't have insurance enough to cover it, you're going to be sued.
Thank you.
I was talking to Brett a little earlier about a situation I knew of. This gentleman was having a third-party CPA accountant looking at it. Turns out that down the road, the grandson went to accounting school. The grandfather allowed him to practice with his stuff with his professor. And turns out the CPA was stealing money from the senior couple. What red flags we could see with money for people that are not trained as accountants? That might be potential theft on seniors.
Well, usually you're looking for unusual withdrawals. It's like you mentioned, having several checks signed that may or may not be explainable. It's really a pattern, and mainly if you're seeing an outside person that seems to have undue influence over the person, those are red flags that come up.
Okay.
Also, if they don't have money to pay for basic necessities,
Right.
that's a red flag. If there's lack of food in the refrigerator or prescriptions can't be paid for, then something typically is up.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Karen, I was at just a quick question. The two cases you reported, Mary Lou, were they, I realize you said anonymously,
Yeah.
but do they actually get back to you, or do you check on it yourself back to make sure that what have you guys done out there? And then the second question is as a caregiver there yourself, do you ever look, Karen, you may say this, will you look at checks to see what's actually being processed through the bank, so you actually have, let me go back 3 or 4 months to see what checks are being processed? Do you do that as part of your home care?
It depends on whether they've asked for that. We don't impose doing tasks that we're not asked to do. But there's usually little things, people are intuitive. And so the things I mentioned are initially things that put us on alert. When they can't afford to pay for their groceries and they can't afford, but yet they're living in a nice home, like something's not kosher, something's not right.
Red flag.
Yeah, red flag.
Not balanced.
And they do get back to us. There have been times when I don't believe that there's abuse going on, because there's dementia issues too. And so sometimes people feel like I shouldn't report it just because I don't trust that the senior really knows what's going on. But you're required that if somebody says to you, someone's taking advantage of me, even if you think it's not valid, you're required to report it. And they do get back to me and let me know that it's closed.
Yeah, at least it gets investigated.
Yeah.
Well, I think
So I'm just as culpable if there is something.
I think it's society, right? I mean, my mother-in-law runs a nonprofit called Overcoming Abuse God's Way, and there's a lot of people that, whether it's in-laws or whether it's kids or whatever, they don't think of the way they talk to their parents or whatever is abuse, right? Because they're the ones doing it, right? Or just neglecting. And so there's a lot of things in regards to the term abuse
It's not
that I
just
think
taking money.
that go unseen in regards to things. And it's watching for those triggers, those red flags, and things that aren't off. You know, especially if you're in that service industry where you have the ability to go and stuff. I mean, I don't work with elders or anything like that, but working with my mother-in-law's nonprofit, I see like the training and I see what we should watch for and listen for and things like that. And it's just making everybody aware of
Yeah.
it.
Well, you're required, and that's the other thing, when you're a licensed agency, you're required to train your employees on recognizing elder abuse. And there's about 4 types of elder abuse. Not all of it is financial. Some of them can be emotional or physical, etc. So, yeah, so we train them on that. And that's another reason why to use an agency, because they're going to be in the home, they're going to be able to see what's happening. And if something, we had one that we had to report because the daughter was selling her mother's possessions for money. So she wasn't taking money out of the checking account, she wasn't,
Property, though.
but she was saying, I like that, and I think I could sell it on eBay. And slowly all her belongings were being, and her mother had some decent belongings. So you just don't, and the caregiver's the one in the home, so.
It's very difficult to capture sometimes.
Do you offer service, like if somebody came to you and wanted to pay you to handle the parents' finances, do you do it, or do you know an agency that will do it?
I can work with them on a fee basis. If it's just a referral, like I may have your mother call an attorney, I'm obviously not going to charge for that. But if I'm going to sit down and go through, piles of records and reconcile things, I can do that.
I would think that would be a whole industry with baby boomers, and lots of them don't have children or they don't trust their children. Who could they turn to and be willing to pay?
Well, a lot of times I can come in as not a family member and say things that a family member really can't say without stirring up a lot of trouble, and I can ask a lot of questions that a family member might or might not feel comfortable asking.
With the Adult Protective Agency out there, do you work with them too as a possible consultant on?
I have not at this moment. There is in town an agency called the Family Service Center, and they also are involved in this. They help families with all kinds of abuse going on, but there is an organization in town called CREA, and that's an acronym that I'm not sure I can coordinate in something. It's about 18 agencies. You can also go online and type in CREA and it'll come up. But I'll tell you, the Family Service Centers where they meet on Madison, and you can get a lot of help through them.
You also have the Aging Commission here in Memphis.
Right.
And the Aging Commission is a nonprofit, and they have attorneys on staff. So,
That's good information.
yeah, that's it. So just make a note of Aging.
How widespread is it, Karen?
It's very widespread, and we don't really know because it's probably the most underreported or unreported. I mean, it's hard to put a number on it, but it's very widespread in all communities of all ethnicities and all socioeconomic.
Are there laws on the books where you have to actually be a felon for the amount
Oh
of
yeah,
money you
they can be
steal, or-
criminally prosecuted.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the other thing is with an agency, you get a fingerprint national background check. 9 times out of 10 or 10 out of 10 if you hire somebody personally, you're not, somebody from church, and you almost feel like you're accusing them of being a criminal if you do a background check, so you don't. And,
But when you do your seminar here up at the zoo, that's a great point.
yeah,
Make sure before you hire anybody, even if it's a private person, somebody you know, do that background check, and I think there's 2 or 3 different organizations or companies that do that background check very thoroughly.
And it could cost you maybe, $40, $50. It's worth it.
That's a great point.
Just to piggyback on hiring somebody that's licensed and bonded, you made a comment about if that person gets injured in your home.
Yes.
Guess what? Your homeowner's insurance is not gonna cover that. If
That's
they are
right.
working for money, financial gain, it is specifically excluded. And a real quick example, I had a customer call where a guy said, I can rake your leaves. So he came in 5 minutes later and he said, I fell, I'm hurt, I have no health insurance. So she wrote out a check for him. Did it 3 times. Now, that was a case of dementia, but you could hire somebody and be
Sure.
of sound mind. Your cleaning lady falls and hurts herself, your homeowner's insurance is not gonna pay for that injury. She has become your employee.
And if you've been paying under the table, then the light is shed on the fact that you've not paid, and nobody's paid taxes on it.
Yeah.
So then you have other issues, so.
You know, yeah, along that, of course, being in the insurance business, one of the things that we're very firm about is nobody works on our property for the tree trimmer, et cetera, that you verify insurance out there and you wanted to get a copy of that policy and then you call that agency and we've got a commercial guy that can certainly, Andrew can certainly address that. You better, one guy said, yeah, I've got insurance. Well, guess what type of insurance he had? He had auto insurance. Working on a house, so.
Yeah.
Andrew, you wanna say anything?
No, it's just with caregivers especially, they're helping pick up and move patients and help them in and out of the bathtub. Back injuries, and back
Yes,
injuries tend
huge.
to linger for, if not lifetime, for months and months at a time. Can be extremely expensive to get care for that, and if you don't have insurance, which most people don't have insurance, you have to go to a caregiver agency to have that insurance. You're going to be paying for that medical care for that
I mean,
caregiver who's hurt her back, and
workers'
she's done this
comp.
several times probably
Yeah.
to several different people, and after the money runs out, then she goes to the next person, works for them for a few months, and then gets hurt again. So
I have workers' comp, I have unemployment, plus I'm insured. So if something happens, you're in good hands.
Thank you for all your comments. My time is up, and I want to thank you for your kind attention and all your comments.
This has been wonderful.
We can stop here for another hour.
Oh, man, you can tell some.
Make sure
you
it's
can tell
on.